And we're live. Once again, the Media Maestro boys are back. Thank you all for joining us and welcome to episode 8 of the Media Maestros. I'm one half of your team, Ram, with the one and only Ray. And we're so glad you decided to stop back and join us one more time for Media Maestros. Ray, my guy, how you been, man? It's been a little minute.
It has been a minute, man. I've been good. I've been catching up on some things that I haven't really been able to get to because of the school semester. So as that's winding down, I've been catching up on some shows and movies, and filling my brain with some good content.
Hey, that's all right. That's all right. It's getting nice outside. The
Yeah,
sun's coming back up. We
feels
took off,
good.
yeah, it feels good. We took off the sweaters. Time to get back into it, man.
Yeah, have you been?
I've been good, man. I been watching some good things. I actually checked out one of our recommendations from the Blast from the Past, the one and only American Psycho.
Oh, that's right.
That movie
Wow.
was not quite what I expected.
I need to hear more. I need to hear your thoughts.
It's funny you mentioned that it's taken on a life of its own as some sort of a anti-hero. The Patrick Bateman is taking on a somewhat of a fashionable villain for a lot of young men.
Hmm.
Anyone that finds him to be fashionable or appealing, please let's have a talk about that.
Exactly.
For those that haven't seen the film, it is quite graphic.
Okay.
Not necessarily graphic in the sense of, today's standards, being that the film came out in 2000, but it's a lot.
It is a lot.
It's a lot. And I actually heard that the novel was even worse.
I heard that too. Yeah. I've never read it, but there's a lot
So
of blood in the film.
there is, but it was a great recommendation. It definitely left me thinking about the
Mm,
ending.
hmm.
What's your interpretation? Spoiler alert for those that want to see it, but what's your interpretation of things that went down in totality?
So, yeah, spoiler alert. My interpretation, I would say, I think that, well, I mean, first of all, the idea of it kind of all playing out in his head and like, the person that he thought he killed still being alive and like just him battling with these internal demons. Apparently, it is like the original author was playing with like a couple of different themes here. Like one of the biggest ones was the idea of toxic masculinity
Hmm.
and maybe in like the way that he treats like the women and then his coworker and trying to like seem like he's better than him is in a sense he it's the film is a visual um it's visualizing a lot of that toxicity that these kind of people like hold in, but it's
Yeah.
showing it's showing him like throughout the most of the film you think he's actually doing these things, but realizing that it's more of an internal thing kind of feeds into that overall concept of toxic masculinity.
Yeah. I think that's a great kind of analysis. And definitely in today's times, one piece that I found to be interesting in thinking about what the film is trying to tell us is the thought or the idea that everything that happened really did happen. And he just got away with it because he's a privileged, white, super ultra wealthy male. You think
Mm,
about, for example, the fact that at the end of the film, and I didn't make all this up myself, did some research. I had to figure out what people were saying. At the end of the film, he goes to the apartment that he's been used as a blood house for the last however many days, tons of bodies all over. And he comes in and everything's clean.
mm-hmm,
No trace of a murder.
mm-hmm,
You may think, huh, did it not happen? But I think what's more believable, sadly, somewhat grotesquely, is that someone cleans everything up and then sells the apartment because this is like prime real estate. Everyone says that it's super nice. Every time he mentions where he lives, people say, "Oh, wow, very nice."
right.
I think that it just goes to show the levels of greed, the levels of just inhumanity that these sorts of places operate with beyond Patrick Bateman. Because I think if it's all in his head, he's the only bad guy. But if it actually did happen, this entire way of living is somewhat of a bad guy at the end of the day.
Okay. Wow. So
Thank-
yeah,
Thanks.
two different schools of thought with that, and that's the beauty of the film is being able to come up with those different interpretations. It's not just clear cut, and the way that deals with these different themes is really interesting, and how it applies to today, from 23 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's what you get when you join the Media Maestros. And we're back again with another episode. Now, Ray, you mentioned you've been checking out some things recently. What's been on your list?
Yeah, so there was one particular show that was getting a lot of buzz, a lot of attention. I was seeing it on TikTok. I tried to make sure I didn't get spoiled because I was actually interested in checking it out. It's a new offering on Netflix. It
Okay.
stars Steven Yeun and Ali
Ah,
Wong.
big Stephen Young fan.
Yeah, he's great. He's killing it. And the show is called Beef, and
Beef.
it's about a beef. It is the premise. Um, basically, you have these two people that get into like this road rage incident. And it's like literally at the very beginning, like the beginning of the first episode, this incident happens.
Mhm.
And then from that point on, it literally just increasingly gets more like they just the pettiness comes out from each of the characters. They
Okay.
try to get back at the other person as much as they can, and things just start really spiraling. And it's not just them, it's like you know the people in their lives are getting like sucked into this
Okay.
situation, and it goes into some really wild places that I didn't expect just from the initial premise of the show. But it's it's really good. It's really well acted, really well
Okay.
directed, well written. And when I got to the end, I was like, wow, that was that was a journey for sure.
Okay. And this is a comedy, right? What I've heard. Or how
Ah,
would you describe it?
it's it's a comedy, it's a dramedy maybe,
Okay.
or a black comedy, dark comedy. There,
Okay.
one of those words probably describes it better than just a straight out comedy, because there are some really dark
Really?
themes and scenes that happen in it. But again, like some of the shows and movies that I've talked about previously, the comedy just comes in from how absurd and ridiculous the events are. Like
I see.
just you see these things like unfold, and it's like you kind of get these glimpses of humor just at how ridiculous either the characters' actions are or what they end up getting themselves in. But it's not just like a bucket of laughs. Like you're not
Laugh, laugh,
gonna.
ha
No, it's
ha.
it's intense, but it's really good. It's really good.
Okay, okay. It seems like Netflix finds a way to keep a sleeper in his back pocket just when people start to get pulled away.
Yeah, I mean, they were the big dogs for a long time, and then you had these other streaming services start killing it, HBO Max,
Yeah.
Hulu, but it shows that they still have a leg in the race as far as the streaming wars go.
And this is a Netflix original?
Netflix original, yeah, straight to Netflix.
Okay. And I mean, as you think about the premise, it seems pretty simple, pretty straight to the point. I mean, how does this compare to some other Netflix originals you might have in mind? I mean, have you found yourself kind of a fan of Netflix's catalog? I think you think we spoke about HBO last episode, and HBO has been able to amass this huge base of big time shows that are just undeniably great. Is this a show
Absolutely.
that you could see in that category for Netflix, or maybe in a few years? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this one I don't think that I can and put this in the Netflix Hall of Fame. It's
Okay,
I don't know if they're coming out with a second season. It might just be a one off. So that kind of hurts it a little bit just being one season. But yeah, Netflix just has way too many of my favorite shows. It's gonna be really hard for something new to come in there.
and
So
just jump on that list.
yeah.
Okay. I mean, I feel like we have to at least give into maybe a top five at Netflix Hall of Fame. Well, I mean, we think we have to at this point. We have to. I'll start.
Okay.
You
Let me
know,
hear
for
it.
for me personally, I have to go. I'll say number five. I'll go with Daredevil.
Ooh, that's a
Now
good one.
that was my introduction into the kind of Daredevil character.
Oh
And
wow, okay.
yeah, I had heard of Daredevil, but I wasn't too familiar.
Hmm.
And I really loved it. I really loved it. Next, I would have to go number four with, and the name is escaping me right now. It's the show. Now this might be controversial. I have to give that primer. Got to go 13 Reasons Why.
Really? Wow.
Got to go 13 Reasons Why.
That is a
And
controversial pick.
13 Reasons Why, when it came out, I was fully engaged. I think that first season was great for Netflix.
I
It,
agree.
it kind of jumped the shark, as we may say.
Yeah.
And I don't even think I watched the last season. So it seems problematic to say it's on the Hall of Fame, but I didn't. But I think it, but I think it has such high highs
Such high highs. Okay. Got you.
and this was one of the first shows, this goes into my next show, Stranger Things,
Mm.
which I loved. And
Hmm.
I think you don't have a Stranger Things if you don't have a 13 Reasons Why. Now, it sounds
Wait.
crazy. It sounds crazy. I might get canceled for this. I'm not afraid to say,
That's a wild take.
but I just think that, and I mean, here's the thing 13 Reasons Why came out in 2017, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
And Stranger Things, the first season came out based upon my research in 2016. Now, granted, that may seem somewhat contradictory. I just think that as 13 Reasons Why reached its peak, it set a standard that was then it set the standard. It carried the tone, and I think it allowed Stranger Things to grow into the behemoth that it was. So I'll elaborate and say that Stranger Things is my top three. I think I think Stranger Things was great. I loved it
Yeah,
personally, and
I
I
love it
think
too.
that it's one of those shows that again I think Netflix kind of has a tendency of jumping the shark. I
That's a
think
good
it went
point.
on a little bit too long. I mean, the kids are they're all adults now, which is a bit much.
Yeah, they're gonna have to do a time jump for this last season, if it is
And
the last.
if it is the last, I mean, this is definitely Netflix's bread and butter at this point. So,
That's true.
number three. Number two for me is going to be House of Cards.
Mm,
House of Cards is another one of those that paved the way just for Netflix originals, period.
for sure.
And it's really sad. I mean, it's more sad for the victims, but Kevin Spacey had his improprieties led to, I think, the show not getting the ending that it truly deserved. So House
Right.
of Cards was great, but for me, that's my number two. And at least in
Okay.
my number one, which I'm going to go with Black Mirror.
That's a great pick.
I love Black Mirror. It's one of my favorite kind of streaming shows of all time. Thought it was great. I'm really craving another season, but I enjoyed it. And I feel like an honorable mention is uh, Love, Death, Robots. I'm not sure if you heard of that.
I
It's
have.
somewhat of a Black Mirror spinoff. And I know it's not originally a spinoff, but it feels as such.
Hmm.
That's my top five, my Hall of Fame. I'm curious, what are your thoughts, Ray?
That's a great list. You know, I might have to steal a couple of those. I'm putting Stranger Things on my list. Um, Actually, I'm gonna just take that one. So, Orange is the New Black
That's a
has to
classic.
be on there.
It's a classic.
It was like one of my favorite shows for a long time, and even when a certain character, died, like towards late middle part of the show's run, and a lot of people ended up falling off.
In real life or on the
And
show?
oh, on the character,
Oh, the character.
yeah,
Okay, that's
I
fair.
don't want to, yeah, but yeah, that character's death spawned a lot of people to not continue watching the show. But I would argue that it really like stuck its landing. Like that last season of Orange is the New Black is one of the best like final seasons of a show, because a lot of times they kind of either go in some really weird directions, or they just don't know how to end it.
As we've
And
seen from Netflix.
yeah, and this one, it every ending made sense for each character, and I think it was masterfully done. um I'm gonna add in, let's see, I'm gonna throw in Mindhunter.
Okay.
It was pretty short lived with only having a couple seasons, but I think it was something a little different than the things that I had previously seen from Netflix. When I saw it, I thought it had a really great like realistic feel. The casting was amazing for all of the different serial killers that they had. Like
Hmm.
when you see like videos or pictures of the real life person versus the actor, it's really really great there. It's unfortunate it didn't get that third season, but I think what it did have was really great. Um, Let me think here. So I would probably have to. I know you said Daredevil, which was really great, but I think I would give you Punisher.
Ah, okay. Another Marvel classic.
I think Punisher was really well done coming off of his appearance in that Daredevil season. He
Hmm.
really was able to carry that show. I think um, that's another really great cast that they had, and even I really like Jessica Jones too. Luke Cage was
Hmm.
pretty good. Iron Fist and the
Yeah.
Defenders, not so much for me.
Not so much.
But but yeah, the Punisher was really great. And then, dang, this is hard. You know what? I'm just gonna throw just a couple more like shout outs, because making a top five is tough.
It's tough.
Um, Dead to Me.
I'm not familiar with that.
It's a show that may not be as popular as some of the Netflix heavyweights, but that's a show that really endeared me. And the two main actresses, it's Christina Applegate, and I'm forgetting the other actress's name, but they are really great together. And that show just finished up this past year, I believe, and really well done. So that might be five. I don't know.
I think
If
that's a
not,
that's a
I'll
nice
throw the
list.
Black Mirror in there.
That's a nice list.
So yeah, a lot of great content on Netflix for sure.
Can't knock any of those. Can't knock any of those at all. Well, since we're speaking about great shows, I'd be remiss if I didn't announce or at least discuss the ending to one of the greatest TV shows of all time.
Mm,
Not too long ago, we had the final episode of the final season of the series Snowfall.
that's right.
Snowfall on FX, a show that I personally was a bit late to. The show came out in 2017, and I didn't first watch it until the pandemic, honestly.
Okay.
And this show really deserves to be mentioned with some of the greatest shows of all time.
Mm,
I think about The Sopranos, I think about The Wire, I think about Game of Thrones, although Game of Thrones is a bit different. But when you talk about shows that show character dynamics, you think
mm-hmm,
about the growth of characters, you think about a story that makes sense from start to finish.
mm-hmm,
Snowfall blew me out of the water. For those that don't know, Snowfall is a show that's set in the 80s and it centers around a young man who becomes a drug dealer. This young man then grows into one of the largest drug kingpins in the entire country,
Mm,
centered around the crack epidemic in
mm,
Los Angeles in the 1980s. And the show just details this character's rise from a timid, bright young man into a ruthless, no holds barred drug lord who will
mm.
do anything for his money. And I don't want to give any spoilers because the show is just that good. But I mean, this show, I could talk about this show for hours. I think some people have taken exception to a couple of things. One, there were a few episodes in the penultimate season that were a bit outlandish,
Mm.
a bit ridiculous. I'll just spoil it. There was one with a tiger in the hood of South Central LA.
Okay.
That was a bit of a reach. A few other things that were a bit problematic, but when you think about the grand scheme of the show, I mean, we're talking, I want to say there are 6 seasons, 60 episodes. You
Mm,
take maybe 5 or 6 bad episodes out of 60 episodes. That's an amazing hit rate. And I think about a show that was created originally with a cast, with a crew of John Singleton, who's since passed away from the
mm.
origin of the show to now. One piece that I really want to laud and applaud this show for is the way that it ended. We just spoke about how so many shows struggle with kind of sticking the landing. I
Yeah.
think this show hit it right on the nose. Everything was sentimental, but all the kind of loops were tied up. This
Okay.
show is amazing. You think about a show like The Sopranos with Tony Soprano, who enters the show as already kind of the biggest drug dealer in his area. You think about a show like The Wire, which has a really unique cast of characters that come in at different points and some die at different points. When I look at Franklin Saint from Snowfall, to see I can't think of another show where a character starts at one point and then over time matriculates into such a different but also kind of a genuine character. It feels real.
Mm.
So I've enjoyed it. Ray, have you seen the show? What are your thoughts?
No, I am one of the few people out there that have not checked out Snowfall. Every year, it would get like a bump in, like pop culture. People would be talking about it. I'm like, oh, I need to check that out. It would fall off, and then the next year, the same thing. But now that it's finally over, I think this would actually be, maybe in the near future, the time for me to just go through and binge the whole thing. So I could definitely see that happening. Um, so I wanted to ask you, as you were describing, this protagonist and comparing him to, you know, Soprano and Breaking Bad, like where do you see Franklin Saint in as far as the list of great TV show protagonists? Is he, high up there for you?
Yeah, when I think about characters like Tony Soprano or Walter White, I think the reason why we love these characters is because we've seen them and their evolution.
Mm-hmm.
A guy like Tony Soprano, we've seen him go from this stereotypical dad to someone with a lot of thoughts and feelings and anxieties and emotions. Look at someone like Walter White, who goes from this kind of awkward, nerdy science teacher into this mastermind drug pen. To see Franklin Saint grow, I think much more dramatically or much more drastically than those other characters, but also it feels real in the sense that it's not forced or
Mm,
it's not unbelievable, at least from my perspective. I think when I think about great characters, I mean, Damson Idris, he acted his tail off from start to finish. This was an amazing showing from him. I think you have to rank him in that list of great TV show protagonists when I think of a drama series. I mean, he was amazing. So much variation, so much growth, so much emotion. I
mm-hmm.
was left to tears in that last episode, and I think it was amazing writing on the character and outstanding acting by Damson. So 2 thumbs up, 5 stars, 10 out of 10. Really well done.
Wow, that's amazing. I definitely look forward to checking this one out. As I've been hearing a lot of great things over the past, handful of years that it's been on.
I think you won't regret it. I think you won't regret it. Now, Ray, did you say that you had a movie that you watched recently that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I've actually seen a couple of movies, actually a few movies, since we last spoke on here. But one that I want to particularly shine some light on is the fourth installment of one of the most renowned action franchises series that we have right now, and that was in John Wick Chapter 4.
Mm.
So I remember seeing that first John Wick movie. Um, had no idea what it was going in. I just happened to go to the theater, and that was the showtime. So I sat down and I was like, wow, like that was it was just a very succinct, path from the beginning and getting that backstory of John Wick and his wife, and then leading to
And his
the
dog.
yeah him inheriting the dog, and then seeing like how devastated the actions that are put against him make him return back into his old life. And it's a story that has been definitely copied since it was released. We've had like people will say like John Wick with blah, or the
Yeah.
blah John Wick, because
Yeah.
that kind of trope has been very relevant in the past handful of years in the movie scene. So but getting to see this fourth chapter, and I've been along the ride and seeing all of the amazing like action. Like it's just it's a movie that each each time you visit this character, you're going to be like they ramp it up every time as far as the action goes. And in this one, you just get floored with what they decide to put this character in and the other characters that are involved. Um, for those who don't know, it's basically this film in particular. You have this character John Wick, who has been um, essentially, like, they call it excommunicado from this underground scene of assassins, and he has been on the run, and he's been trying to um, escape from the actions that he had performed in the previous movie. And you have this force of people, and their only job is to basically eliminate John Wick. You have people that come in and try to help him. You have people that come in and are trying to get this bounty. He has a bounty on his head, and it's just a really fun movie. Like it's great to see these filmmakers just able to craft a film that has great pacing. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I mean, this is actually a pretty long film, but it doesn't really feel too long just because of the way that they segment everything. They segment, the action, and they get into like the more heartfelt stuff. They get into the character dynamics, and I think it was just really well done as, um, a franchise that has been going on for since, I believe, I want to say 2017. So it's like 6 years now.
It's been a
Fourth film.
while. Yeah. And is this the last? I've seen a couple of John Wicks. I really want to beef up my history with the series. Is this the fourth and final installment, or do you see them running this back at least one more time?
So I believe they have announced spin-offs
Ah, okay.
that are coming from this, with a couple of different characters that were introduced that are going to get their own films based off of the events of this one. And it may be the last time that we see John Wick. It may not be, but I definitely have trust in what the people behind the camera have in store to carry on this franchise. So we'll just have
Okay.
to see how that plays out.
I'm gonna have to check that out. Okay. Well, Ray, I have one album I want to talk about because this week's Blast from the Past is one of the most popular albums of all time. but at the time was a bit of a different approach for this artist. For those of you that don't know, the album I'm talking about is Thriller by
Mm.
Michael Jackson, the one and only, regarded by some as the greatest album of all time. I think I might be in that camp. Every
Wow.
song on this album, if you haven't heard it, I think many of us know Thriller. Is it Thriller? We know that. But what you don't know is that every single song in this album is a classic. Wanna Be Starting Something, track one. Baby
Mm.
Be Mine. The Girl Is Mine, Paul McCartney.
Mm.
Thriller, classic. Beat It,
Mm.
classic. Billie Jean, classic. Human Nature, classic. PYT, classic. The Lady in My Life, nice song. These are all great songs. And we talk about artists trying things different, artists stepping out of their bag.
Yeah.
This at the time was, excuse me, was different from Michael Jackson. He was
Mm.
still relatively young in his career, only
Mm.
about 24 to 25 years old, but he wanted to step into something a little different. And I think for those of us that haven't spent a lot of time with this album, I think it's worth going back and checking it out, Ray. What do you think?
Yeah, this is, a great album. It's, well, I guess you can easily consider it one of the best. Would you call it pop? How
I
would
think it's,
you
I think it's still pop. It's still pop.
it, this all the songs that you described are songs that I'm sure everyone has heard at one point in their life because, you know, they it's just had such longevity. And this is something that came out over 40 years ago,
41 years.
and it's still like these songs you could play at a cookout or something, and people are still going to be like singing along or dancing to it, and that's proves that it's definitely a classic. So I support that sentiment.
It's a classic indeed. And with that sound, we thank you all for joining us for another classic episode of Media Maestros. We thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. Until next time, peace.
See ya.